The gleaming halls of the Galactic Assessment Center had never seen anything quite like him before. Tom Miller walked through the pristine corridors, his heavy boots echoing against the polished floor in a way that made the delicate alien sensors flutter in distress. At 2 meters tall with broad shoulders and a muscular build typical of his Earth-born heritage, he stood out dramatically among the willowy forms of the alien staff. "Species of origin?" asked the blue-skinned administrator behind the registration desk, their 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession as they looked up, and up, at Tom's imposing figure. "Human, from Earth," Tom replied simply, keeping his voice soft. He'd learned early in his spacefaring career that his natural speaking voice tended to startle most alien species. The administrator's upper set of eyes widened while the lower set narrowed, a clear sign of distress in their species. "Earth? But that's a Deathworld classification. We don't usually." The job posting didn't specify any planetary restrictions, Tom pointed out, sliding forward the official application on his tablet. "I meet all the listed qualifications for the strength assessment position." The administrator's fingers flew over their holographic interface, their movements betraying their nervousness. "Yes, well, technically that's true, but..." "Then I'd like to proceed with the assessment," Tom said firmly but politely. He'd faced this kind of prejudice before, the assumption that because humans came from a high-gravity, death world, they were somehow too dangerous or unpredictable for standard galactic society. After several moments of apparent internal struggle, the administrator sighed, a universal gesture that Tom had learned transcended species barriers. "Very well. Please proceed to Assessment Chamber 12. The testing equipment has been calibrated for standard candidates." They paused, adding somewhat uncertainly, "Do try to be gentle with it." Tom nodded, suppressing a smile. Little did they know that gentle was exactly what he'd been practicing for months. Back on Earth, he'd specifically trained to control and moderate his strength, knowing that the galactic standard for maximum effort would be very different from human norms. As he walked toward Chamber 12, he could hear the whispers of the other candidates and staff. "Is that really a Deathworlder? I thought they weren't allowed in standard assessment centers. Look at the mass of that creature." The testing chamber door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with various pieces of equipment that looked almost delicate to his human eyes. The testing supervisor, a tall, reed-thin alien with silvery skin, stood beside what appeared to be the main testing apparatus, a device that somehow managed to look both incredibly advanced and worryingly fragile. "Welcome to the Strength Assessment Chamber," the supervisor said, their voice carefully neutral. "We will begin with a simple calibration test. Please grasp the handle and apply what you would consider to be 10% of your maximum strength." Tom stepped forward, eyeing the handle thoughtfully. He'd practiced this, measuring his output carefully with specialized equipment back on Earth. He knew exactly what 10% of his strength felt like. What he wasn't sure about was whether this alien equipment could handle even that much. As he reached for the handle, he could see the supervisor taking an unconscious step backward. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen when a Deathworlder finally took their strength assessment test. Tom wrapped his fingers around the handle, noting how the metallic surface felt oddly warm against his skin. He took a deep breath, consciously relaxing his muscles and recalling his training. 10% strength, beginning now, he announced, and began to apply pressure. The machine hummed softly, its display lighting up with scrolling alien numbers. The supervisor's silvery skin rippled with what Tom recognized as their species' version of surprise. "That's impossible," they muttered, tapping rapidly at their control panel. "The readings must be incorrect." "Is there a problem?" Tom asked, maintaining his careful grip. "According to these readings, your 10% strength exceeds the maximum output we've recorded from any previous candidate," the supervisor said, their voice trembling slightly. "Are you certain you're only using 10%? Tom nodded. "I trained extensively with calibrated equipment on Earth before coming here. I can demonstrate 5% if you'd prefer to start lower. The supervisor's assistant, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward with their own measuring device. The readings are accurate, Chief Supervisor. The human's baseline strength appears to be significantly above our expected parameters. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the continuous hum of the testing equipment. Tom maintained his steady pressure, watching as more alien officials began to filter into the observation area behind the transparent barrier. He could see them gesturing animatedly at their data tablets. "Very well," the supervisor finally said, their professional demeanor slightly strained. "Please release the handle. We need to recalibrate our equipment before proceeding to the next phase." Tom carefully let go, noting how the handle itself had developed slight indentations where his fingers had been. The supervisor's assistant quickly approached with a scanner, their hands shaking slightly as they documented the deformation in the supposedly ultra-resistant material. "We've never had to use the enhanced testing protocols before," the supervisor explained, accessing a hidden panel in the wall. From it, they retrieved what looked like a much more robust version of the testing apparatus. This equipment was designed for theoretical use with Class 12 strength species. "We've never actually needed to, well, no matter. Please give us a moment to set it up." As the testing team worked to replace the standard equipment, Tom could hear the growing crowd of observers discussing the situation in what they probably thought were whispers. "Did you see the stress readings on the first device? How can their muscles generate that much force without tearing themselves apart? No wonder they survived on a death world." The new equipment looked much more substantial than the first, with thick support structures and what appeared to be some kind of energy containment field. The supervisor's assistant was still casting nervous glances between their data pad and Tom's relaxed stance. "This device," the supervisor explained, their voice steadier now, "can handle significantly more force. We'll start again at 10%, but please be prepared to adjust if we need to recalibrate again." Tom approached the new handle, noting how it seemed to hum with barely contained energy. He could feel the eyes of every alien in the room fixed upon him, their collective breath held in anticipation. The stakes had just gotten higher. This wasn't just about passing a strength test anymore. This was about proving that humans could control their power, that they weren't just the brutish Deathworlders many in the galaxy assumed them to be. He reached for the handle, his fingers hovering just millimeters above its surface. "Ready when you are," he said calmly, though inside he was wondering just how much this enhanced equipment could really take. The enhanced testing apparatus hummed with a deeper, more resonant tone than its predecessor. Tom gripped the new handle, immediately noting the difference in construction. This one didn't yield even slightly under his touch. "Beginning test at 10%, the supervisor announced, their voice carrying an edge of scientific curiosity that slightly overshadowed their earlier fear. "Please proceed, Human Tom." Tom applied pressure gradually, just as he had before. The machine's readings immediately began climbing, digital displays flickering with rapidly changing numbers. This time, however, the equipment held steady. "Fascinating," the supervisor murmured, their silvery skin rippling with excitement rather than fear now. "The force application is perfectly controlled. Not a single spike or tremor." They turned to their assistant. "Are you recording this?" "Every detail," the assistant confirmed, their own measuring devices whirring continuously. "The precision is remarkable. Most species show significant variations in their force application, but these readings are almost mechanical in their consistency." Tom maintained his steady pressure, allowing himself a small smile. The countless hours he'd spent training with precision equipment back on Earth were paying off. Each day, he'd practiced holding exact percentages of his maximum strength, working until he could maintain any given level indefinitely without wavering. "I believe we can proceed to the next phase," the supervisor announced. "Human Tom, please increase your force application to 25%. The observation room had grown even more crowded, with aliens of various species pressed against the transparent barrier. Some held sophisticated scanning devices, while others simply stared in obvious amazement. Tom carefully increased his pressure, watching as the readings climbed proportionally. At 25%, the machine's hum deepened to a low throb that he could feel through the floor. Extraordinary! The supervisor's assistant exclaimed, their professionalism momentarily forgotten. These readings exceed our highest recorded measurements by several orders of magnitude, yet the human appears to be exerting no significant effort. That's because I'm not, Tom explained, keeping his voice gentle. This is still well within my comfortable range. A murmur ran through the watching crowd. The supervisor's upper appendages twitched in what Tom had learned was a sign of intense scientific interest. Then perhaps we should proceed to 50%? Tom nodded, but before he could adjust his grip, a new figure entered the testing chamber. This one wore the elaborate insignia of a high administrator, their deep purple robes swishing as they approached. "Stop the testing," the high administrator commanded, their voice carrying the weight of authority. "This is unprecedented. We need to convene an emergency session of the assessment board." The supervisor's skin paled to an almost white shade. "But High Administrator, the readings are clear. The human has demonstrated perfect control and—" "Precisely," the High Administrator interrupted. "These results will revolutionize our understanding of species classification. We cannot proceed without proper documentation and oversight." They turned to face Tom directly. "Human Tom, would you be willing to participate in a more comprehensive evaluation?" Tom maintained his grip on the handle, still holding steady at 25%. "What kind of evaluation?" "One that will help us better understand the true capabilities of your species. One that might—" the High Administrator paused meaningfully, "lead to a reassessment of humanity's current classification in the galactic community." The implications of those words hung heavy in the air. A chance to prove that humans were more than just Deathworlders, that they could be precise, controlled, and worthy of full galactic citizenship. "When do we start?" Tom asked, finally releasing his grip on the testing handle. The High Administrator's expression shifted into what Tom recognized as a smile. "Right now. Bring in the Class 15 equipment." The Class 15 equipment arrived on a heavily reinforced hovering platform, accompanied by a team of technical specialists in protective gear. Unlike the previous testing devices, this one looked like it had been designed for testing small spacecraft rather than biological entities. Its base alone was wider than Tom was tall, with massive power conduits snaking across the floor. This equipment, the High Administrator explained, was originally developed for testing the structural integrity of deep space vessel components. It has never been used for biological strength assessment. Tom watched as the technical team worked to secure the machine, noting how they kept glancing in his direction with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The new testing interface wasn't a simple handle this time, it was a comprehensive force measurement system with multiple contact points and stability controls. "The system will adapt to your force application," one of the technical specialists explained, their voice steady despite their obvious nervousness. "It's designed to provide increasing resistance until it reaches either your maximum output or its own operational limits." The supervisor stepped forward, their silver skin now showing patterns of scientific excitement. "We'll start at 50% this time, given your previous performance." Tom positioned himself at the main contact point, placing his hands on the smooth, metallic surface. The machine hummed to life, energy fields shimmering around its frame. The crowd in the observation room had grown so large that some observers were being turned away at the door. "Beginning at 50%, Tom announced. He took a deep breath and began to apply force. The machine's response was immediate. Energy readings spiked across all displays, and the resistance it provided felt substantially more challenging than the previous equipment. Yet Tom maintained perfect control, his muscles barely straining as he held the exact force level he'd trained for. Incredible, the technical specialist muttered, checking and rechecking their readings. The force output is higher than anything we've recorded from any known species, yet the control matrix shows perfect stability. The High Administrator moved closer, their robes rustling. Increased to 75%. Tom complied, smoothly ramping up his force application. The machine's hum deepened to a resonant growl, and the power conduits began to pulse with bright energy. Warning indicators started flashing on the control panels, but none had reached critical levels. The energy conversion systems are operating at 90% capacity, one of the technicians reported, their voice tense. We've never seen readings like this. How are you feeling, Human Tom? The High Administrator asked, studying him intently. Comfortable, Tom replied truthfully. This is still within my normal training range. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The High Administrator's expression shifted to what Tom recognized as their species' version of determination. Then let us proceed to full power. 100%. The supervisor's assistant stepped forward quickly. High Administrator, the safety protocols are noted, the High Administrator interrupted. But we must understand the full scope of human capabilities. Proceed, Human Tom. Show us your maximum strength. Tom looked at the machine, considering. He'd trained for this, practiced controlling his full strength countless times. But this equipment, advanced as it was, wasn't designed for human power levels. He could already hear the strain in its systems at 75%. Are you certain? He asked, giving them one last chance to reconsider. The High Administrator's all four eyes fixed on him with unwavering intensity. Absolutely certain. Proceed. Tom nodded, took a deep breath, and began to increase his force output toward maximum. The machine's growl rose to a roar, its frame beginning to vibrate with contained energy. The testing chamber's atmosphere grew thick with tension as Tom approached his full strength. Warning lights flashed across every control panel, and the machine's power conduits pulsed with barely contained energy. He was only at 85% of his maximum output, but already the equipment was showing signs of severe strain. Power conversion systems at 120% of rated capacity, one technician called out, their voice barely audible over the machine's roar. The containment fields are starting to fluctuate. The High Administrator remained fixed in place, all four eyes locked on the readings. Continue, they ordered, even as their skin took on the pale hue of nervous excitement. Tom reached 90% of his maximum strength. The floor beneath the testing apparatus began to crack, tiny fissures spreading outward like a spider's web. The observation room had fallen completely silent, every alien witness pressed against the barrier, recording devices forgotten in their hands. 95%, Tom announced, his voice steady despite the tremendous forces he was exerting. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, not from physical strain, but from the intense concentration required to maintain such precise control. The machine's frame groaned, its reinforced structure beginning to bend under forces it was never designed to contain. Emergency sirens began to wail, their harsh tones adding to the cacophony of stressed metal and overtaxed power systems. All safety parameters have been exceeded, the supervisor shouted, their professional demeanor finally cracking. We need to. Before they could finish, Tom reached his full strength. The result was spectacular. The testing apparatus's main frame buckled with a shriek of tortured metal. Energy containment fields collapsed in cascading waves of blue-white light. Power conduits burst in rapid succession, sending arcs of electricity dancing across the ceiling. The reinforced contact points where Tom's hands pressed against the machine compressed like clay under his grip. Evacuate. Everyone out, the supervisor ordered, but nobody moved. They were all transfixed by the sight of a human finally displaying their true strength. The High Administrator raised their hands, voice cutting through the chaos. "Human Tom. Please cease all force application immediately." Tom gradually reduced his pressure, demonstrating the same precise control in descent that he had shown in escalation. As his force output dropped, the catastrophic destruction of the testing apparatus slowed, then stopped, leaving the chamber in eerie silence broken only by the occasional spark from severed power lines and the ping of cooling metal. When he finally stepped back from the ruined machine, the full extent of the damage became clear. The Class 15 testing equipment, designed to test spacecraft components, had been completely destroyed. The floor beneath it was cracked in a 3-meter radius, and several of the chamber's power systems had automatically shut down to prevent a cascade failure. That, Tom said into the stunned silence, was 100%. The High Administrator approached the wreckage, their movements slow and deliberate. They studied the compressed contact points where Tom's hands had been, then turned to face him with an expression that mixed awe with something else, understanding. "Now I comprehend," they said softly, "why your species survived on a death world. But more importantly, I understand why you deserve to be part of our galactic community. It's not just your strength, it's your control over it." The supervisor's assistant, who had been frantically recording data throughout the entire event, suddenly spoke up. "High Administrator, the final force readings, they exceeded our theoretical maximum by several orders of magnitude. We'll need to create an entirely new classification system." The news of what happened in Testing Chamber 12 spread through the Galactic Assessment Center like a plasma storm. Within hours, representatives from various species scientific councils began arriving, their vessels filling the center's docking bays. The small testing chamber had been transformed into an impromptu conference room, the destroyed equipment left in place as a stark reminder of human capabilities. Tom sat calmly in a specially reinforced chair as various experts examined the wreckage and debated among themselves. The High Administrator had taken personal charge of the proceedings, their earlier apprehension completely replaced by diplomatic purpose. "The implications are clear," a green-skinned scientific advisor was saying, gesturing at their data displays. "We've been categorizing species purely based on their homeworld's gravity and their raw physical capabilities. But the human has demonstrated something far more significant: precise control over immense power." Another official, this one covered in iridescent scales, stepped forward. "The Deathworlder classification was meant to protect both them and us. But look at these control readings." They projected a hologram showing Tom's force application graph, a perfectly smooth curve from start to finish. "This level of control defies everything we assumed about high-gravity species." The High Administrator raised their hands for silence. "Human Tom," they said, turning to face him. "Your performance today has raised questions that will reshape our understanding of species classification. But I must ask, how common is this level of control among your people?" Tom considered his answer carefully. "The strength itself is fairly standard for humans, though some are stronger and some weaker. As for the control..." He paused, choosing his words with precision. "Every human child is taught to control their strength from an early age. We have to, living on Earth. What I demonstrated today is the result of specific training, but any human could learn it." This statement caused another burst of excited discussion among the gathered officials. The supervisor, who had been quietly analyzing data in a corner, stepped forward with a new observation. "According to our historical records," they announced, "humans have been participating in galactic society for several standard cycles now. In that time, despite their strength, there hasn't been a single recorded incident of accidental damage to standard equipment or facilities." The High Administrator's skin rippled with patterns of deep thought. "Because they've been carefully controlling their strength all along," they concluded. "Every human in the galaxy has been consciously operating at a fraction of their capabilities to safely interact with our infrastructure." Tom nodded. "We're used to it. Earth has many delicate things too, not everything on a death world is tough." We learn to be gentle with smaller creatures, with plants, with tools. It's as natural to us as breathing. A new figure entered the chamber, one wearing the distinctive robes of the Galactic Council itself. The entire room fell silent as the council representative moved to the center of the gathering. The council has reviewed the preliminary reports of today's events, they announced, their melodious voice carrying easily through the chamber. We are hereby initiating a complete review of the species classification system. The term Deathworlder will be reconsidered, with a new emphasis on measuring control alongside raw capability. They turned to face Tom directly. Your demonstration today has shown us that we have been working with an incomplete understanding. Strength without control is merely force. Control without strength is merely restraint. But together. They gestured at the destroyed testing apparatus. Together they represent something we failed to properly evaluate until now. 2 weeks after the historic strength test, Tom stood before the full Galactic Council. The Grand Chamber, with its soaring crystalline architecture and floating platforms, held representatives from every recognized spacefaring species. The destroyed testing apparatus had been carefully transported here and stood on display, a twisted monument to human capability. We have reviewed all evidence from the strength assessment incident, the council leader announced, their voice echoing through the chamber. Our conclusions will change the course of galactic society. The High Administrator, now standing as a witness, nodded in agreement. Their report had been instrumental in the council's deliberations. Humanity's classification as Deathworlders was based on an incomplete understanding, the council leader continued. We saw their powerful bodies, their dense muscles, their ability to survive conditions that would kill most species. But we failed to recognize something far more important, their masterful control over that power. Tom stood straight but relaxed, his posture itself a demonstration of the principle under discussion. Even now, he was carefully moderating every movement, every gesture, to put the nervous aliens around him at ease. The testing chamber incident has taught us that raw strength is not what we should fear or respect. It is the wisdom to use that strength appropriately. The council leader gestured to the ruined equipment. Human Tom demonstrated not just physical power, but the ability to control it with microscopic precision. This combination is what truly defines humanity. A new classification document materialized in the air before the assembly, its text glowing with official authority. Therefore, we hereby establish a new category in our species classification system. Humanity will be designated as a Guardian-class species, one that combines great power with great control. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. The term Deathworlder had always carried negative connotations, but Guardian class spoke of responsibility and respect. Furthermore, the council leader added, we are implementing immediate changes to our strength assessment protocols. All species will now be evaluated not just on their maximum capabilities, but on their degree of control. Humanity has shown us that this is the true measure of advancement. Tom stepped forward when invited to speak. On behalf of humanity, I accept this new classification with humility and understanding. We have always known that our strength comes with responsibility. On Earth, we learned this lesson from every delicate flower we tended, every small animal we cared for, every fragile tool we handled with care. Our power didn't make us superior, it taught us to be gentle. The council chamber fell silent as his words sank in. Many of the representatives were seeing humanity in a new light, not as brutal warriors from a harsh world, but as beings whose very strength had taught them the value of restraint. The new testing protocols will be implemented immediately, the council leader declared. And they will include equipment designed to properly measure human capabilities. They paused, adding with what Tom recognized as humor, much more heavily reinforced equipment. Laughter rippled through the chamber, breaking the last remnants of tension. The destroyed testing apparatus would be preserved as a reminder, not of human strength, but of the day the galaxy learned to look beyond its preconceptions. As Tom left the council chamber, he passed many aliens who now looked at him not with fear, but with newfound respect. He had come to take a simple strength test and had ended up changing the galaxy's understanding of what true strength meant. The term Deathworlder would fade into history, replaced by a deeper understanding. Humans weren't just survivors of a harsh world, they were guardians who had learned to balance power with precision, strength with sensitivity, and capability with control. In the end, it wasn't about how much force one could exert. It was about knowing exactly how much force to use, and more importantly, when not to use it at all.